Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge. We are once again here at the legendary Sardi's, and my guest is giving one of this season's breakout performances as Anatole in the uniquely theatrical musical Natasha, Pierre, and the Great Comet of 1812. Please welcome Lucas Steele. Well, welcome. Thank you for sitting with me here at Sardi's.
Hi, honored to be here.
So, you are giving one of the stellar breakout performances of the season as Anatole.
So nice
I know.
of you. Thank you.
What's it like living in the world of Tolstoy, created by Dave Malloy?
I think really the world is your oyster in this particular iteration of what's going on with it, the way that it's staged, but even the way that Dave chose to adapt the book.
Yeah.
I think it's an incredibly sophisticated yet accessible adaptation that he's done in order to get it to stage, let alone like in a, not just a play, but in a musical, because these are two very different worlds to function in.
Yeah.
And I think to have all of these elements, it's very classic what we are doing, the way it's written. There's a lot of asides to the audience, which is a very Shakespearean thing. The idea of a Greek chorus that is existing, is sort of aware of what's going on top of the eclectic score, and then how we are traveling through the space. I mean, it really, every night is an adventure, and it's like nothing I've ever done before.
Yeah.
Except 3 other times.
Well, let's talk about it. Take me back to the beginning, because you created this role in its original off-Broadway production and every incarnation. I mean, when you first got the breakdown, or how did it all happen for you, this show?
Yeah, I got an email from my agent, as you are wont to do as a working actor, and she said, it listed the breakdown and said there's this workshop going on, and Ars Nova was doing it. Tiny little place over on 54th Street that now a lot of more people know about this, which is
Love
awesome.
Ars Nova,
Yeah.
always have.
Yeah, such eclectic, interesting, off the beaten path, raw work going on over there. I checked out that breakdown. It listed this character named Anatole as being a David Bowie-like kind of guy. And meanwhile, I had been going back and forth between Europe and New York for about 4 years in a development deal for an album that I was working on that was a very commercial electro-pop kind of very Billboard-focused project. And that project sort of took on a life of its own and started moving in this direction. It was a modern-day Ziggy Stardust. And so I had spent a lot of time researching Bowie and kind of just watching him on YouTube, which is such an incredible archive now to be able to find things and study them. And just I was completely enthralled by the way he can possess like such masculinity and such femininity all in the same thing. There's an androgyny there that's very strong but also sensitive and open at the same time. So I knew a bit about Bowie and how he functioned. So I went to that audition and I actually wrote about this in the Great Comet book.
Yeah.
Which I have to say is a beautiful book. So
you should pick it up.
Not to plug it, but you should really take a look at it.
It's a great book, sure.
Yeah, it's lovely and kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I went to that audition, and that was the first time I met Dave and Rachel. I had heard about their work on 3 Pianos, which happened down at New York Theatre Workshop a couple years before. Maybe it was less than a year before. I'm not sure about the timeline on that, but I had certainly heard of them. And it's an interesting, being an actor is a fascinating, these are fascinating shoes to fill as your job. And to walk into rooms and to constantly be trying to get a sense of the idea of what they want. It's easy to lose yourself in that and dwell in the pursuit of, who do I need to be in order to get this job? And I think I was at a point in my life and in my career then where I realized it was a bit senseless to be focusing on that instead of doing the work that I just should be doing. So that day, I had this moment, and they said, did you bring something to sing? And I said, I did, but do you mind if I just play for myself? And they said, okay. And I did this arrangement of these two pop songs that I had mashed together. It was, a little more sophisticated than what you would hear them normally on the radio. And I finished, and it was silent for a moment, and they said, okay, can you sing through the sides? And I sang through them, and then, she asked me to make some adjustments, which I did, and check out the book, you'll get the details. But that was how I first came on board.
It's funny because the way you play him, it's the perfect melding, I think, of artist and material.
Thank you.
I mean, right? Don't you agree?
Yeah, it's hard for me to... I'm constantly in the pursuit of how do I make something better, which I think is the gift of doing theater 8 times a week, is you have the chance to work on it and tweak it. There is a point when you have to, I'm very much aware of policing myself, because if you start doing that too much, it's completely functioning outside the reality of what the moment would be, because nobody functions in that that detailed or a refined, polished way. But I do think it's been a perfect sort of alignment of who I am as an artist and ability and study. And our director, she gave me a card opening night, Rachel, wonderful Rachel, in which she said something to that degree. I think she said it's like Tolstoy and Dave sat down and had a conversation about you and wrote this for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that this doesn't really come along often, so I'm very, very grateful.
Has your Anatole changed? I mean, I've seen you in every incarnation along the way.
Yeah.
Did you have to alter him for Broadway, or has he changed a little bit?
Yeah, he's changed slightly through every iteration. I always built him for the room that he was in. It's important to me, the exchange that happens energy-wise with an audience. To me, this is just as important as what you are doing action-wise as an actor. So, Ars Nova, he was probably the realest he will ever be in Ars Nova, because people were this close.
Yeah.
And of course they're still this close, but now they're hundreds of feet away. So there is space that needs to be filled energetically and dramatically. And I kind of sang him at Ars Nova however I wanted. I was just sort of using my voice as his. When we moved to the tent, I think that was where we explored this direction of him being, I don't want to say he was typical, but he was obviously a rake that was coming in to this situation, and I'm not quite sure if you would perceive that he was really in love with Natasha, that she might just be a conquest. And that style, when I was thinking about how am I going to sing this version of it, it was more of like a Freddie Mercury, sort of David Bowie kind of thing going on. And again, these are slight shifts, because there needs to be the truth of my voice always there. But I do try to influence each character I play with a slightly different tonal quality, because that, to me, supports the acting as well. What is your voice if it is not in alignment with the truth of the text?
Yeah.
Separating these things doesn't really make sense to me as an actor. And then when we sort of got up to ART, and that's when I started thinking, okay, commercial theater is a different beast, and there are different expectations, and how do I expand who he is, vocally in particular, but also hang on to the things that I think are the essence of making the role interesting and not necessarily being cookie cutter or commonplace. Yeah. So that began that experience of figuring out how to kind of open him up, and that continued throughout this process as well. And I have to say, nightly, it is it's an interesting thing when runs of a show for so long, and it's one thing to show up and kind of knock it out of the park for a month or 2 or 3, but when you're at the 6-month point and you're looking at how do I maintain this, and how is my voice sort of shifting and growing through this process, because when you're singing the same thing over and over again, it's easy to start really just laying into it vocally and going, yeah, I've got this, but your voice sort of starts, it can get developed in other directions. So like, say you just do bicep curls for 6 months, it's going to be a problem.
Because I was going to ask you, how do you stay in shape? This is such a demanding role vocally and physically for you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in and about the audience. So how many stairs do you run up and down in this show?
You know, I've never worn a Fitbit, so I don't have an exact number on this, but my calculations between all of the stairs backstage, which a lot of people don't think about the fact.
Yeah.
Out front, clearly we're running a lot of stairs, but we're running just as many stairs backstage to get up onto the mountain of a set. And then when you add in stairs to the dressing room, stairs to go downstairs to various departments that you need to visit during the show, I think it's close to 90 or 100 flights of stairs, which is pretty much the Empire State Building. So wrap your head around that every night.
Twice on Saturdays.
Yes. In heeled soldier boots, which again was a challenge, learning how to maintain all of this physically. There's the multitasking that is going on in this production. I've never faced any level of this.
What kind of prep do you do before your performance? Because once you're on stage in the show, it's a roller coaster ride. The show begins and it's over.
Yeah. I show up at the theater, I shave. It's the first thing I do, I shave.
Yeah. How early do you arrive?
I usually get there an hour beforehand, maybe an hour and 15, depending on what's going on that day. I start rolling out my legs with a foam roller. It's essential to roll before and after the show.
Got it.
I know it sounds so basic, but it really is like a staple to surviving this. Then I go down and I do a fight call with my buddy Josh Groban. And when we're finished with that, I come back up and I start doing some squats and some, physical therapy things that activate muscles. And then my hair gets dealt with.
Do you do your own hair or they do your hair?
I do. They take care of the color, which is a process. It takes.
You have the most amazing head of hair, my friend.
Well, thank you.
I would take 9 of your hairs and just stick them in the front of my head, believe me.
I wish I could take credit. I can't. My mom and my dad both have great hair, so I lucked out.
Oh, so they work on your hair, right?
Yeah. Well, they take care of, I think every 6 weeks we deal with maintaining the color of it.
I love it. Here's a part of your performance.
It is, and a very specific one that early on I just felt he needed. Rachel and I had many discussions about this idea of Anatole being an alien. And not to the absurd degree, of course, where he acts like one, but he is an alien in Natasha's world. She's never seen anything like this. She doesn't even really know how to communicate with this at first. It's hard for her to even sort of get sentences out. So we wanted to I talked with her about pushing him in this direction that was homage to Bowie. Without the extreme side of that, but a tasteful homage to him.
So the first time you saw yourself done up in the mirror, hair and all, costume, boots and everything, do you remember what you were thinking?
I was thinking, I hope this works. That's what I was thinking.
They should make an Anatole doll.
There's our bartenders at the theater. They're awesome. Jonathan and Kristen, as well as numerous others. But they are super supportive, and they actually...
Made you a doll?
We call it Anatole, and he hangs out
at the bar.
And I kid you, if you go on my Twitter or my Facebook or something, you will see he has lights behind him, like with the entrance. And the first time I saw it, this started with them surprising me various nights. With funny things like taking my head and putting it on a New Year's Eve baby or simpler things like that.
Yeah.
Because I enter through the back
Yeah.
of the house twice. So I would go by them, and I saw, I was making my entrance and saw another member of the house staff, and they were like, "It's a good one tonight." And I went walking through, and I saw this lighted object at the bar, and as I got closer, I realized it was Anatole.
Okay,
So
you have this most amazing fan club. What are they called?
They're called the Fanatoles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have they wanted to take this doll?
Yeah, they have visited the bar
A lot.
I think Anatole might be more famous than I am, to be honest. He gets more traction.
You love your fans, don't you?
Yeah.
They give you a lot of fun stuff?
Well, yes, and I have to say they're integral.
Yeah.
This business, like we said, is up and down, and who knows when people are interested and why they're interested or why not. And having a supported fan base is super crucial.
Sure it is.
And of course, no one can put their whole existence into that, like that being your validation. And there's a ton of soul searching that needs to be done, but it is super helpful to have a supported base that cares about what you're doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's made it so special for you with sharing the stage with Josh Groban and Danae Benton?
Josh is an incredibly humble, giving, really wonderful human being. And I remember when I met him downtown at the tent, he came to see the production when we were down in the meatpacking district. And he was super effusive and hung out with all of us afterward. You know, there's pictures documenting that.
Yeah.
And it's so, when I found out he was doing it, I thought this is really serendipitous and a bit of a full circle moment, especially for him. And I immediately kind of bonded with him. And I was traveling in Europe this past summer. So I was visiting some people from that record deal that I had been in, just to reconnect with them. It had been many years. And thought, well, I should take a vacation before Broadway owns my life. And Josh was on tour. So I texted him and I said, hey, I'll meet up with you in Frankfurt.
Wow.
Check out your show. And we had lunch and I spent the day with him, and it was really cool to be on the inside of his life. And even he is an international star, you know, and even to walk down the street with him in Frankfurt and him to be aware of the fact that there has been someone following us with one of his albums, you know, for several blocks. And I wasn't even clocking it at all, you know, and suddenly they're there and he's dealing with it. And I said, did you see him coming? Like, where? And he said, oh yeah, he's been following us. But he's super humble about that. He's not ever...
he's so nice to his fans.
Yeah. Doesn't ever put that down, which I'm sure can be very exhausting after many, many years of it. But spent that day with him, went to sound check with him. He killed it that night in concert.
Wow.
And that was kind of the beginning of building that relationship with him, because I think the important thing about what is going on with Anatole in this play is there's a romance with Natasha and there's a bromance with Pierre. And Anatole is bouncing back and forth between the two of these individuals, completely unaware that he's doing anything wrong. But there needs to be a relationship with both of those people for it to resonate in any sense of conflict. And then, you know, speaking on the romance part of it with Dear Today, you know, fortunately we had the time up at ART to get to know each other and sort of figure out what this was. And I'm very protective of the Natashas. I always have been. I think it's an incredibly demanding position to be put in at such a young age, when you are playing a part that is that large. You know, it's sort of like Alphabet in different ways, but it's big. Yeah. And I've, you know, been fortunate enough to kind of build a relationship with her in which I do my best to support and champion. And she's lovely. Yeah, she's been an absolute champ. Yeah.
I want to go back to the beginning. What was that defining moment for you when you said, I want to be a performer? Do you remember that moment?
Yeah. It all sort of blurs for me. I started out super young at the age of 3.5.
Playing the piano, right?
Yes, yeah.
Did you learn from ear?
I did, yes. Yeah.
I wish I had that kind of talent.
I mean, it really is luck of the... I wish I could take credit for it, but who knows why. So I started playing very, very young on this little toy piano. And I had, it was in a department store, and my mom was with my grandmother, and she sort of kept losing track of me, and they would hear this piano coming from the corner of the store, and they'd find me back there. So my mom got me out of there. It was Thanksgiving, I think, so my grandmother picked it up, and it was under the tree on Christmas Eve. And I took it home, and I put it next to the big piano, because my mom was taking lessons to play the piano in church, like to play the hymns and whatnot. And she'd been working on a certain hymn for a month, probably. And I put it next to the piano, and I sat down, and I played that hymn that she'd been working on. And my parents said, "Can you do that again?" And I did it again.
Wow.
This is all what's kind of told to me. I don't really remember this. There are certain images of it I remember, and the sound of the piano I remember, but so things very early on started going in that direction. And then I'd say when I was 10 or 11, my grandfather passed away, and he left me his violin. He used to play at Hoedowns. I come from a very tiny town in Pennsylvania. Yeah. And I thought, well, I want to learn this to honor him. Very blue-collar guy. Ran an automotive business that my father took over. I spent lots of time working there growing up. And I started taking violin lessons. And that was that teacher, Mary Chase is her name. She was integral in opening my eyes to the fact that there was a world outside of the 500-person town that I was growing up in.
Wow.
And I remember one day I played through a song in my lesson book, and she said, "Watch out, Carnegie Hall, here comes Lucas Steele." And I looked at her in all seriousness, and I said, "What's Carnegie Hall?"
You made your Broadway debut in the Three Penny Opera.
I sure did.
Opposite Alan Cumming and Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah.
Favorite memories of that, and what advice did Cyndi Lauper give you?
Yeah. That show was such a crazy experience, I have to say. I mean, and I think we had an amazing time on stage, and we had a really amazing time off stage. Because when you're rolling with those kind of artists, it is an ever-changing and fascinating situation at all times. I very much think about Alan. I've stayed friends with Alan. Another guy, been in the business a long time, doing amazing work. Was not about being a flash in the pan. Cindy's a rock star. I mean, she's I've never seen anyone so honest at all times, even when you're not expecting it. Like, what's going on in her head may have not exactly anything to do with what's going on in the current moment, and she will just speak it, and somehow you'll think, oh God, that on a spectrum somewhere, this does have to do with what we are all discussing right now. And fascinating. I think this is how great art is made, not looking at it through the typical lens. And I remember hanging out. There was a lot of going out after the show, which I could get away with because I was an ensemble and in the understudy. In the ensemble and an understudy. And we were out one night at a bar, and we were sitting there having a conversation and talking about the business, and I was writing. I've always been writing. I started writing when I was 5, and music, and talking about what it is to work in theater and sort of the confines of that when you are an actor and showing up and doing other people's material. And after we talked a little more about that, she said, "Kid, you don't ever need to settle. You don't ever need to settle." And I took those words and I held them super, super close.
You also appeared in one of my favorite musicals with one of my dearest friends, Christopher Sieber, in the musical The Kid.
Yeah.
That was a big deal for you, wasn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. That was the first time I was playing a principal role.
Yeah.
and doing it opposite of all these incredible people that I'd admired for years. I don't have enough superlatives to describe the talent of
Christopher
him.
Sieber, yeah.
Yeah. It is like he's never trying.
Yeah. He just is.
But everything lands.
Yeah.
His voice is wonderful. His acting is wonderful, from the comedic to the serious. He's in complete command of what is going on, like with the audience, but without this way of, I am making you watch me.
Yeah.
And that was a masterclass in hopefully taking some of that from him. Yeah.
Music. You talked about your music. I mean, what gives you the greatest artistic satisfaction with writing music and touring Europe?
Again, it's been a process of development. So, I started out writing very singer-songwriter kind of material, and going into the record deal, and having to very much focus on how do you write a hit. This, again, it's easy to go, whatever, anyone can do this. This is like capturing lightning in a bottle. Writing something that sounds fresh and new, yet reminds someone of something, so it's familiar at the same time. That experience was super influential, and I sort of stole things from that, of how to craft hooks and whatnot, and I feel like evolved into a style, which I will be sort of unleashing this at some point in time. The music that I've been working on for the past couple of years.
Wonderful.
But it's evolved into this thing that I hope is sophisticated and artistic, yet completely accessible and crafted in a way where both things can complement each other.
So we see an album in the near future? An album?
I hope so. I very much hope so.
My final question is, what is the best bit of advice that you've been given, either personally or professionally? The professional one we got from Cindy. Personally, what's the best bit of advice that you've been given that you live by?
I think this is something that I'm still learning to carry out. And that is that your work cannot define you. And that sounds so simple, but it's easy to get caught up in everything that is this craft. And especially if I'm a bit of a perfectionist, it's really easy for me to go, my work tonight was not up to par, which then starts this domino effect of, I'm no good, and I'm not worth this or that, and what am I doing? And it's learning to show up in the moment and do that, and then just kind of let it go afterward.
I have had a great time sitting with you here today. Like I said, you were giving one of the finest performances of the season. You were so wonderful to watch.
Thank
and like
you.
I said, going back to Three Penny, to the kid, and every incarnation of the Great Comet, it's so wonderful to watch you make that entrance.
Thank you.
And I think I'm going to go to the Imperial Theatre and check out your doll.
Please do. Say hello to Anatole.